Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Love Infused Kitchen. On today's episode, I'll be making a peanut butter and banana cake with a whipped ganache, and I'm going to add a little spin to it. I really enjoy Biscoff cookie spread, and I think a lot of other people do too. So I thought, what if I add a little bit of that to the cake and to the whipped ganache? So let's see how it all turns out. To start, in a medium bowl, we're going to mix together 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Here in a cup I have a teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to mix that in. And then we're going to stir that up. Okay, now we're going to set this aside. And in another bowl, I'm going to cream together a 1/2 cup of butter. So that's a whole stick. I'm going to add, it calls for a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. I'm going to cut that in half. So I'm going to do partially applesauce and partial vegetable oil. So it comes out to be a 1/4 cup with both of those together. I wanted to try a healthy alternative than to adding all that oil. So I thought I wanted to try the applesauce with that. So we're going to add that together. Next, we're going to add 1 cup of sugar. So I've got a cup of sugar here. And then I have 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Add that in here. Before I mix this up, I'm also going to go ahead and add the Biscoff to this mixture. So here I have a 1/2 cup of Biscoff cookie spread. All right, let's blend. All right, now it's light and fluffy. Let's scrape the sides, and then we'll give it another little mix. Make sure we got everything incorporated. All right, so now that's mixed up. Now we're going to mix in 1 egg at a time. Let's start with 1. Okay, next I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Then I'm going to add my banana. Next, I'm going to alternate flour and buttermilk. I hope this is going to fit. My two 9-inch round cake pans that have been greased with coconut oil, and then I put a round parchment paper on the bottom and then also greased on top of it. I had so much cake batter that I wasn't sure if it was going to be too much for the cake pans, so I went ahead and put what was left into a third pan. The oven is set at 325, and the recipe calls for the cakes to bake for 50 minutes. I'm going to check them sooner. It's been 45 minutes and the round cake pans are ready to come out. The square pan came out sooner. So it's the next day, and both the cakes have cooled, of course, because they've sat overnight in the fridge. I'm going to pull them off the plate now, and I'm going to take a serrated edge and cut them both in half. That way we'll have 4 layers of cake. There we go. Okay, we'll set this back on this. going to set these aside for the moment. Time for the peanut butter buttercream. So we're going to, the recipe calls for 1 cup of butter and 1 cup of shortening. I'm not a fan of using shortening, so I'm going to use 2 cups of butter. So that's 4 sticks. Okay, now I'm going to add it. The recipe calls for a 16 to 18 ounce container of peanut butter. I'm going to do half peanut butter and half Biscoff. So that's going to be about 1.5 cups. So let's I would say that's probably about 3/4 of a cup there. I would say that's about 3/4 cup there. Alrighty, let's cream that together. Okay, so next the recipe calls for you to add 1 cup of the powdered sugar at a time. So I have a 1/2 cup in here because I feel like it'll be easier. So we'll just add a 1/2 cup at a time. So I decided to split some of that up. That was too much icing. It was throwing it everywhere in this one little bowl. So I just split up what was left of the powdered sugar in that bowl and then maybe half of this icing. So total, the recipe calls for 5 cups of powdered sugar. I added probably 4 and maybe 3/4 cup. I don't always feel like you need to add all the powdered sugar, so go by how thick the icing feels for you and what consistency you like to work with. You don't necessarily need to add all that powdered sugar. So here's the first layer, and I'm going to add about 3/4 cup of this peanut butter frosting. Layer number 2. I meant to add some wax paper underneath the cake here to make it a little easier to clean up. This is the 4th layer. You know what? Let's turn it this way. Loading up my piping bag to do a few little designs. We'll have to wait for these though until after I get the ganache, chocolate ganache done and get it dripping down the sides. For the chocolate ganache, I have a 12-ounce bag of Ghirardelli semi-sweet chocolate chips. I'm going to put those into a bowl. Next, I'm going to take heavy whipping cream and measure out a cup of it. Looks good. So this 1 cup of heavy whipping cream is going to go into a pan. And we're going to heat this heavy whipping cream in the pan just until it begins to boil. The heavy whipping cream is now almost to a boil, so I'm going to take it and add it to the chocolate chips. And then I'm going to cover it for 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes, so now I'm going to stir the chocolate and heavy whipping cream mixture. And now I'm going to let this sit for a few more minutes and let it thicken up, and then we'll pour some of this down the sides of the cake. I have the ganache here and it's thickened up. I think enough that we can now let it drip down the sides. So I'm going to use a spoon for that. I'm now taking the chocolate ganache, which has sat in the fridge for probably 45 minutes to an hour, and whipping it. I end up not using it because it's too hard to squeeze through the piping tip that I had. I should have used the larger one that I was using with the peanut butter frosting. But I do have to say, I don't think the cake needed it. It would have been too much. This cake, just as it was with the peanut butter icing and the ganache dripping down the sides, was plenty good. I guess. All right, guys. I'm going to do my taste test here. Here's the piece of cake.
What's that?
Came out a little bit messy. All right, let's try it. This cake was definitely a labor of love. This cake is rocking, but it took a long time to make.